I would like to thank our sponsors, Step Forward, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Amity University. So the lineup we have for young faculty as such is Dr. Aishwarya Venkatesh, Senior Scientist, CCMB, Dr. Pravat Kumar Paridia, Assistant Professor, ISER Behrampur, Specialization in Metabolism and Cancer, Dr. Ritabrata Thakur, Assistant Professor, IIT Delhi, Specialization in Applied Mechanics. I would ask Vaishali to continue with the remaining young faculty's introduction.
Thank you, Pracheta. We also have with us Dr. Antara Das, Assistant Professor at Aziz Premji University, specializing in neurobiology, and was a former postdoc at UC Irvine. Dr. Dilip Kumar, Assistant Professor at Ashoka University, specializes in structural biology and was a former postdoc at Bayer College of Medicine. We also have with us Dr. Anushka Shankar, Assistant Professor at TIFR Hyderabad, specializing in ecology and was a former postdoc at Cornell University. I would like to request Pracheta to introduce the next faculty member, please.
Last but not the least, we have Dr. Swastika Banerjee, Assistant Professor, IIT Roorkee, specialization in theoretical chemistry. Now, I would request Dr. Aishwarya Venkatesh to speak about her academic journey in 3 to 4 minutes. I would like to share the slide which she had shared. Yeah. Dr. Aishwarya?
Sure. Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning to everyone. I'm joining you all today from Hyderabad. So I'm happy to be a part of this panel and share my experiences in transitioning to India and what I've learned the last 2 years. So I did my entirety of my training in the US. I did my PhD in the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, specializing in neurobiology of repair using zebrafish as a model system. And then I stayed on in Milwaukee for my postdoc at Marquette University, where I continued to look into spinal cord repair using mice as the model system. And then I did a 3-year to 3.5-year non-tenure position there, sort of peeling off into independence, where I was able to test the waters with my ideas and securing funding in the US and so on. And after that, I moved to CSIR CCMB. So for about 6 to 8 months, I was a Sir Ramanujan Fellow from April to December of 2022. And then I transitioned to a senior scientist, where I continue till date.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aishwarya. This was very insightful. Next, we have with us Dr. Pravat Kumar Parida. May I kindly request Dr. Parat to please introduce his work in a time duration of 3 to 4 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Good morning to all. So I'm now working at ISER Berhampur. So in previous year, I was basically in the same place that you guys were. So I had joined Sci-ROI in last year, and now I'm happy that I come back to India and join ISER Berhampur. So basically, my postdoctoral work was at UT Southeastern Medical Center, where I was mostly focused to understand the mechanism of metastasis. Mostly, I was looking at the metabolic rewiring that is promoting metastasis. And when I was looking for position, I actually applied for so many places. Like I applied at least, I remember I applied for 16 places, and I got at least 5 interview calls and 2 offer letter, and finally I joined my hometown, basically, which is in Odisha. So that's why I joined ISER Berhampur. And here I'm also looking at like how metabolism shapes metastasis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pravat. Now I request Dr. Thakur to give his introduction.
Hi, good morning, everyone. People in the US, good evening to people joining from India. I am Ritabrata Thakur. I am currently an assistant professor at IIT Delhi's Department of Applied Mechanics. So I did my undergrad and master's and PhD in India. With my PhD starting in TIFR Hyderabad and then moving on to ICTS Bangalore, which is also a center of the TIFR. Then I went to the University of Michigan during the COVID period at Ann Arbor to the Department of Earth and Environment Science. I did my postdoctoral research there for 3 years, and my first entry into India was through IIT Delhi's Applied Mechanics Department. So I have been working here for the last 1 year or so. So it's nice to be in this panel. So I joined a panel like this from the US about 1.5 years ago, which when I was trying to apply to different places, and lots of new faculty members at that point were sharing their views, which were very helpful. So I am happy to at least be able to give back something to the people looking forward to coming back to India, because this platform has actually helped me quite a bit while I was applying. So thank you for having me here. Look forward to more discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thakur. Next, we have with us Dr. Antara Das.
Hi, everyone. My name is Antara Das. I'm an assistant professor at Azim Premji University in Bangalore. I did my undergrad, master's, and PhD from India, and then I did my postdoc from UC Irvine. In my PhD, I was studying Drosophila models. I was looking at the circadian rhythms. And in my postdoc, I started looking at epilepsy models of mice. Although I kept my core area of looking at ion channels and neurons similar, but I had changed my model system. When I was moving back to India and I got the position at Azim Premji University, I got to know that they don't have a vivarium, and I wouldn't be able to bring back the mouse model system. So then I moved back to Drosophila. So currently I teach here in the undergrad program. So I also carry out research primarily with undergrad students, and we are now looking at epilepsy in Drosophila models. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Now I request Dr. Dilip Kumar to kindly introduce himself.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back in a Sci-ROI event. I have been there as a participant, as a volunteer, now I'm as a panelist. So it's a good feeling. I wish I could have been there in person. So, and I must also acknowledge I got my current position through a virtual Sci-ROI recruitment event because I started applying during the peak of COVID. And Sci-ROI team came up with this innovative idea of doing virtual recruitment drive, and that is what facilitated my entry or coming back to India. So I did my master's from Ambedkar Center for Biomedical Research, University of Delhi, and then I did my PhD in structural biology at CSIR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. Then I moved to Houston at Baylor College of Medicine, and I started working on gastroenteric viruses, rota and norovirus, using again structural biology methods. I moved back to Ashoka University exactly two years back in July 2022. And here my group is again working on different viruses, which are more relevant to Indian context, many flaviviruses such as dengue, chikungunya, and Zika viruses, using again structural biology tools of cryo-electron microscopy and X-ray crystallography. And since I am a structural virologist, during COVID time, I also started doing this science communication and outreach activities. And I believe over time, I'd like to do these things more regularly. So yeah, that is it. I'm looking forward to your questions as we move forward. Thank you, organizers, again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. It is always very encouraging to listen from the members who have been volunteers and always been recruited through Sci-ROI and have used this amazing platform. Next, we have with us, Prachita, if you can please move the next slide, please. I can probably announce meanwhile. Next, we have with us Dr. Anusha Shankar. Uh, Dr. Shankar, please, if you would like to introduce.
Sorry. Hi. I think I didn't share my slide, but I have it with me. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I am now at TIFR Hyderabad. I joined about 11 months ago. The end of September will be at the end of a year for me. I did my undergrad in a small college in Chennai, and then I went to Pondicherry University for my master's, PhD at Stony Brook University on Long Island in New York. I went to Alaska for my first postdoc, and then my second postdoc was at Cornell. And so my background is in ecology and physiology, and I'm excited to set it up in TIFR Hyderabad because there's very little ecology in Hyderabad in general. There's only 3 or 4 of us. So I feel like I have the opportunity to start something new. And in a country that I relate a lot to and that I want to train people in, that I want to do tropical biology in. And so I have never attended Sci-ROI. I only attended YIM, which is an equivalent event in India, if you haven't heard of it. And I think these are wonderful opportunities to network with people and really find ways to find institutions that are a good match for us. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. We were hoping that Dr. Banerjee is there. She will be joining in some while. So thank you all for that lovely sharing your experience, sharing your journey with the participants. We have some few questions as such for the panelists, and then we open the forum for discussion. So a question which I have, which either of the panelists can answer, did you have any apprehension while you were having that transition? And a follow-up to that would be, when did you start planning that, okay, now this is the fellowship I would like to apply for when I would be transitioning back? So, or this is the institute that I would like to apply for. So I can have Dr. Aishwarya, if you can start this discussion forum.
Sure. So the first part is, was there any apprehension? Second is about timing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Apprehension, I'd be lying if I said I was not having any apprehension. I think I applied during the peak of COVID. I was on the job market right around the second wave, which was horrific in India. So I had a lot of apprehension about the timing of it all, and also just in terms of facilities and reagents, and would I still be able to do what I was doing back in the US? And I must say, 2 years in, I've been able to do exactly whatever I wanted to do. I've not cut any corners in the kind of science I'm doing or the kind of vision I have for the lab. So the apprehension has sort of evaporated and now replaced by, I don't know, relief, I guess. So if for anyone on the other side, you can do what you want to do. And as far as timing goes, right around the time I submitted sort of the major cornerstone work from my postdoc was when I started getting ready to apply. One thing I noticed was the application committees were sort of keen on seeing that big paper out before they made a decision. So although I applied when I had a preprint, it did become clear that having that major paper out was going to be key. So I'd say I started about a year before I joined, which ended up becoming a lot more time than I expected, like I said, because of COVID. But about a year and a half before you're ready to launch, probably will be a good time to start thinking about it. And I applied widely as far as knowing where do you think you're a good fit. Like I said, I did my entire training abroad. I didn't have any network in India, so Google was sort of my go-to. And I applied to almost all the major CSIR institute, ICERs, IIT, and all the common institutes you can think of. And I think along the way, just during the interview process, it became clear where I could fit better, both in terms of infrastructure and facilities, but also in terms of independence and being able to do what you want to do in terms of your science. So I think that's a little bit of a cast a wide net and narrow down as you go. At least that was it in my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aishwarya. Dr. Kumar, would you want to add on to it?
Well, apprehensions, I mean, I did my PhD master's, everything in India. So I was very well familiar with the system. So there was not many apprehensions as such, except I was coming into field, which was cryo-electron microscopy. And when I was applying, I believe there was only one place in India where we had microscopy facility, it's NCBS. So yeah, I was a bit apprehensive, and I had some apprehensions in the beginning that whether I'll be able to do things what I wanted to do, as Aswari also suggested. But before I moved in, there were other more couple of more microscope setup. One of them was in IIT Delhi, so that was over, and now it is optimism, I would say. And the timeline, I would say, is the ideal timeline is 3 to 4 year of your postdoc. And I believe everyone who wants to come back, they target that sweet spot. And most of us could not achieve that for obvious reasons. And I believe like all of other panelists, I also was applying during the COVID peak time. It further increased the timeline at least couple of years, or at least 1 year for us. But I would suggest people who want to come back, they should start doing their research at early stage, at least third year of their postdoc. And if they can start applying, like preprints also may work before the fourth year, because you are eligible for even early career welcome fellowship. You are eligible for most of the Ramalinga and Ramanujam fellowship. So these are the things which give you an edge if you are applying earlier. The moment you cross that 5 year timeline, things may become little tricky. They will ask for the big papers and all these things come into picture. So yeah, I mean, for me, it took a year more than I had expected or planned originally. From the day one of my postdoc, I knew I have to come back. But yes, the timeline extended a year or two, I would say. But yeah, if and is well, all is well. So eventually I landed up a place where I wanted to be, and I cannot have much of complaint in that sense. It's pretty good to be here. So I would suggest all of the aspirants just keep themselves prepared and use all the facility opportunities, like YIM is one of them, as Anusha suggested, and also Sci-ROI virtual recruitment drive is a fantastic event that I believe is also planned in near future. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Dr. Shankar, would you want to add on, because you're also a Ramalinga Re-Entry Fellowship awardee? So
Yeah, sure. Tons of apprehensions for sure. I was living in the US for 11 years, and until I went to Cornell for my second postdoc, I didn't enjoy the culture all that much. But then suddenly I enjoyed it after I started applying for faculty jobs in India. So I was like, should I stay in the US? Should I go back? Do I want the culture of India? Do I want the culture of the US? But I think I had this whole list of fears building in my head before coming back, that after I came back have not played out at all. Most of them have been, India is very different than the India that I left 11 years ago. I think it's much more progressive, much more open. Science is like flourishing. And I was also not at the kinds of institutes that TIFR is. So I have access to a kind of science that is just very different. And culturally also, like the society is very different than it was 11 years ago. So it's been really easy to live here. And it hasn't been as much of a culture shock as I expected, and I love it. I was terrified about permits and bureaucracy, and I'm still a little scared about those things. Ordering stuff is much harder than it was even 3 years ago. So some things have gotten more difficult, but I think science marches on and Indians find a way, and we'll keep doing our work, and it'll keep happening. And in any system you're in, people complain about ordering stuff and complain about traveling and complain about booking things. So I think it's just all context dependent. And I think it's okay, and we'll find a way forward because all of us are in this together. I think worrying about age and when this balance of having enough papers and being too old is really complicated in India, and it's very different from the US. So the questions I was asking to my future employers were very different in India than what I was used to and exposed to from the US culture. So if I got advice from my postdoc advisor in the US, it was kind of irrelevant for the job search in India. So I think speaking to people who have done this recently in India is really important to know what to ask about. Like they don't give you a lot of things in your offer letter that you are trained to expect in the US in the offer letter. So the negotiations are different and stuff like that. The timing of it, yeah, I really was not expecting it to happen the way it did at all. I heard about TIFR Hyderabad because someone sent me the ad, and I didn't really know about TIFR Hyderabad. I applied before I applied anywhere else. And it took about a year and a half for the process because they weren't sure that my field was really where they wanted to go next. So it took some debating. But ultimately, a year and a half later, I got the offer. And in that time, I'd applied to a couple of other places. So I interviewed at, I could have interviewed at multiple other places, but I ended up taking the TIFR offer. So yeah, I think like Dilip said, you should really prepare early and apply early because this is a very, very long process. And so knowing it's very hard to time it. There's really no easy way because all of these offers might come at different times, and then you have to know how to handle it, and it's very uncertain. It's really hard, but I think starting early is better. And they keep telling you to get the big papers out, but sometimes you apply before the big papers are out and you get it, and sometimes you don't. And there's no clear answers because it always depends on who else is applying, who else is on the committee and things like that. So just speak to a lot of people really early. And yes, I got the Ramalinga Swami Fellowship. I actually applied for that when my application was in good progress with some places. So I was sure that I would get in somewhere, kind of. But you should really be speaking to the institutes that you're applying to before applying for these fellowships because they need to give you a letter of support. And some of them prefer doing that for people that they're relatively sure they're going to take rather than to people as just fellowships.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. So the same question for Dr. Das and Dr. Thakur with respect to, public and private university. So Dr. Das, you can start with it.
Yeah, so I started so I was on a J1 visa, and I started applying towards the 4th year because I was not sure. It was COVID 2020, so I was not sure if my waiver would come in time and whether I would be able to transition into H1B. Also, both me and my partner, we were very sure we wanted to come back to India, so we were looking at that 5-year mark, and so we both started applying. And I applied to a bunch of places. And in that research, and when I was talking to people back in India, I started getting to know who were hiring, or I was at least trying and getting that information. And somehow in that thing, I think Azim Premji popped up. So I just sort of found people on LinkedIn who were either associated with the university, and then I just sent a letter asking, could you connect me to the bio department, not knowing whether they're going to hire or were hiring. It was a shot in the dark, but it fortunately resulted in an online chat with a couple of the faculty in the bio department. And they told me that they could be potentially interested in somebody who was trained in neuroscience and would be interested in teaching and all of that. And that they would be hiring in the next cycle around December and Jan. But I kept my options open because I was working in a mouse model. I was trying to see in which departments in different ISERs or other universities or research institutes I would fit. But like everybody else said, I was waiting for that big paper. And that big paper did not really happen. We got rejected from Journal of Neuroscience. And then it went to eNeuro. And that's when I had also transitioned into the other lab because my previous lab ran out of funding. So I knew I was working on a new project and it would take time. And I did not have a lot of papers in the pipeline. Yeah, and then so I did not wait for that big paper. I had a preprint, and there was some Jove article that was going to come out, and I started applying with that. But then I heard back from colleagues and other people that I will not make it into any mainstream research institute because I did not have enough papers from my postdoc. And so around that time, the Azim Premji University interview happened, and I had to make a trip during April of 2021, I guess, peak of COVID, but somehow it happened, and then I was offered the job. So I would say a year before your visa is running out, or even if you have some preprints and even if you have a paper or something has been submitted, a lot of the places would consider that. But yeah, for me, because I had changed my model system, I realized that in a postdoc, unless I had a lot more papers to support the fact that I have mastered this mouse model system and I am an expert in that field, it was difficult to land a job. And yeah, so trying to talk to more people in India and figuring out where you might be a good fit. And in that research, I sort of got to know that APU is a very teaching heavy place. And again, I talked with my mentors in the US, and in UC Irvine, actually, we have a very nice postdoctoral teaching training session, which I was part of. So it really helped me in my application in APU. So collectively, it worked out. So casting a wider net, figuring out where you might be a good fit and what you want to do in future. So balancing research versus teaching, whether you are ready for that or not. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so a quick comment on it, Dr. Thakur.
Yeah. Okay, so with regard to my journey, so I was sure of coming back to India. I didn't have any apprehension of coming back. So I was sure about applying to different places, and I started about a year earlier than my postdoc was supposed to end, and and the process took about somewhere around 6 to 9 months, depending on the different places. I visited a few places in India while I was here in the winter break. So many of these places that I visited didn't work out because they didn't have openings for people of my research background, but it actually helped me a lot to refine my seminar talks. But I'd say it's best to apply at least 1 year in advance, and I also apply to a lot of places. So it's best to not choose in the beginning, that I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur. Vaishali, would you continue with the next session of questions?
Yes. So next we are quite interested in knowing what are the funding opportunities for the young investigators. So this question has two parts. So the funding opportunities which are available for investigators when they are planning to apply while moving back. And secondly, the funding opportunities after they have moved back. So what is the funding scenario in India? So we can start with Dr. Thakur right now and then go back.
Okay, I'm not probably the right person here in this panel to talk about funding, because I don't need a lot of funding. I work mostly on theoretical and computational side, so my only requirements are high performance computing and some computers for myself. So I wasn't really worried about funding at all. The funding that I have secured till now is based on the institute funding, and I'm waiting for the transition of the SCRB to the ANRF to apply for some funds. There are funds available, but for a very new person that's moved into a theoretical field, there are some limitations. But I think that ecosystem is probably going to change now. There are some joint opportunities like Indo-Russian or Indo-UK proposals, but that needs some active collaboration with those people from those places. But that's not what I have currently. So there are some collaboration opportunities available with people from different institutes where you can jointly apply for a large grant to some ministries. For example, one of the relevant ministry for my work is Ministry of Earth Sciences and the Naval Research Board. So we are planning to submit some joint proposals there. And Department of Science and Technology also provides some grants. So it's not, I mean, there are lots of opportunities available, but sometimes it takes some time. For example, it has taken me about 1 year to wait for the fundings to open and then get to know people, know the system, how the funding situation works. Because unfortunately, I wasn't working. I didn't write those funds and proposals during my postdoc. So I needed some time to get used to it along with my teaching responsibility. So it was that scenario for me.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur. Dr. Aishwarya, if you would like to go next.
Sure. Okay, so funding in India, the first part was what can we apply for before we land there, right? So I think there's a Ramanujan Fellowship from SERB and there's DBT Ramalingaswamy, which most of them I think know about it. I think my experience has been that if an institute is actually serious about absorbing you, then they agree to give a host letter. So it usually happens at the terminal stages of your interview process with an institute. To me, Ramanujan was matching the salary of what I would have got as a senior scientist. So that was terrific and fantastic. What is important to keep in mind, though, is that if you do get a permanent position, then you hand over the entirety of your grant, even if there's research funds that are given. So you'll have to be aware of that. I didn't know that we'd have to give it back. So not just your salary, but that. So those were the two major grants I applied for prior to landing. Once you land there in India, there you have a couple of major funding agencies. You have SERB, you have DBT, you have Welcome DBT. And then you have CSIR, which I'm a part of. So we have CSIR funding and DST. So I think the biggest shift for me was realizing that unlike our NIH R01, R21 that comes out at, you have defined cycles. Every June you apply and then you find out like this. That sort of very structured calls are not out. But what I found is SERB has a startup research grant that we're eligible for, I think, in the first 3 years. So that is the first thing to shoot for. DBT also, I have applied and successfully gotten DBT funding. But the point here is to keep in mind it took 2 years. So I applied in May of 2022, initially to the letter of intent. And for the whole process to happen and funds to get released, it took April of 2024. So now the way I look at it is what I'm applying now will actually fund my lab 2 years at least down the line. That's the realistic expectation. CSIR funding, also, I think now it started to become regular. I have something called a HCP fund, which is a headquarter coordinated project. Those tend to be cyclical also, but I think really depends on the focus areas for CSIR in a particular given time. So I would say the smartest thing to do is to probably have a couple of grant ideas sort of fleshed out, ready to shoot out whenever you need to, because you're not going to get a lot of downtime to prepare and strategize before you apply. Usually you find out and then the deadline's a couple of weeks to a month. So I think even if you don't have a lot of preliminary data, just having sort of an idea of what you want to do, how it ties up to what you've already done, and whether you can pull it off in the institute that you're currently in. That sort of skeleton, if you have it prepared, I think that really helps a lot. And of course, you cast a wide net. So out of, I think I applied for maybe 10 grants in last 2 years. I've gotten around 4. So you can just sort of do the math on your own. So, but all the rejects are usually very precious because then you use that to recycle in the next cycle. So my lab tends to be very consumables heavy. So the reason why I need so many grants is because all of the work we do tends to be expensive on the consumables. But if you're not a consumable heavy person, then I think even with 1 or 2 grants, you can happily run the show. The only key thing to keep in mind is the timing. So keep in mind that if you do apply, it's going to take quite a bit of time. So figure out a game plan for how you're going to tide over during that period. And I want to chime in here that CCMB was extremely supportive in the 2 years that I started my lab. So I was able to run solely using institutional support. So the biggest cultural change that you might not be used to is we don't negotiate a startup here. This might come as a shock. It came as a shock to me that there's not going to be a bolus of money that you sort of get for you to plan. But on the other hand, anything that's within reasonable request, our institute has funded. So I was able to generate all of my preliminary data for all these grants using institutional funds. So it also helps to be in a place where there's lots of facilities. So you can actually use the central facilities to also generate a lot of data. So funding opportunities, I so far haven't found a huge constraint. Only thing is you have to keep, throwing at the wall until something sticks. It's sort of that is a strategy.
Thank you, Dr. Aishwarya. Dr. Dilip, if you would like to go next, please.
Yes, so in addition to what Aishwarya has already told, for coming back, I think welcome early is also another opportunity. People who are before 4 years of their PhD, they can also apply. In addition to that, when you are back here, you have opportunities from like TBT, ICMR is one of the big funding agency, and then DST and also CSI. So now the SERB is turning into ANRF, and we do not have any certainty that how the funding scenario will be there in next like few months. But we are waiting and we are hoping for the best. But how it worked for me is little bit differently, and that's probably because I'm a structural biologist, and it gives me an edge to collaborate with many people. So for first 2 years, which is just completed, I got again a very good support from the institute. We had a generous support from the institute to run our lab and generate few data, establish things. But how I secured my funding, again, like as well as suggested, I applied more than I would say around 8 to 10 grants, and 2 of them I secured, few rejections and few I'm still waiting. And it takes 1 to 2 year standard timeline to get your acceptance or acceptance of your grant, and then getting money takes another 6 months or 2 years. But the way I secured grant is through collaborative projects as a co-PI. So I got one ICMR and one DBT grant, which is good enough for me to run my lab at least for next 3-4 years. And that again was because of networking and talking to the people and reaching out to the people who wants my expertise as a complementary to their project. And when they see that they require it, they're happy to collaborate. So that is how I have been able to secure my funding. So I would suggest again the importance of networking to all the aspirants. This works not just to coming back, also it helps you to establish your things when you are here. Rest of the things I believe have been already covered by Aishwarya. There's not much to add. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip. I would also open this question to Dr. Das, Dr. Anusha, and Dr. Pravat if they would like to add something to this, and then we can move to the next question.
So my situation was slightly different. I had to set up the fly facility here. So my department was very supportive. I negotiated to purchase a few things that were needed to maintain the fly stocks and work with the flies. So I could purchase a few things when I was coming back from the US. So they had given me some money initially. And also the university gives a small grant to the in-house faculty. So I have been collecting prelim data using the university in-house grant. And the hope is to apply for power grants or other DBT grants. I'm also looking for potential collaborators. So we had a couple of grant writing workshops at the university, so that gave us some idea about what we can do and how we can increase our chances of securing a grant, because a lot of our time goes into teaching, and there are 2 months in summer when we don't teach, and probably that's the only time we can um, uh, completely devote to research and grant writing. So I agree with Aishwarya that you should have some fleshed out ideas and some grant in some structure ready, because when the deadline comes, you probably get to know a couple of weeks and you might be engaged in something else. Yeah, but for me, my lab does need consumables, but a lot of the things are in shared places. So in terms of equipment and some of the consumables are shared within the bio department, so a lot of it comes from the department budget. But I had to secure other things like the CO2 tanks and other things which other people don't use. But yeah, the in-house grant has been useful. And also to negotiate with your employer right at the beginning what is possible and what kind of support will they give to initially give you a lab space, and what kind of equipment you could purchase right away, and what you need to buy with your own money and your own grant. So some kind of an expectation out of the employers about when do they start seeing you completely independent, and what kind of timeline and what kind of funding they are willing to provide to you is what I have to add. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm still pretty early on, so I don't have that much experience other than having the Ramalinga Swami. And I do have institutional funds, like Aishwarya said. to start me off. And I don't really use the shared facilities because I'm an ecologist and there aren't other ecologists. I need to like do field work in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh and God knows where else. But I'm collaborating with other people to do that who already have those permits. So my strategies are maybe a little different than many of you in terms of what I need first. I don't have much else to add.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. I'm sure our participants have much more interesting questions to ask to you. So I asked Polemy to take over. The forum is open to discussions with the offline participants. Polemy?
Yes, thank you very much for conducting the session, and thanks to all the speakers. Now it's open for us. If you have any questions.
Yeah, hi, here. I'm Shashank from UT Southwestern. It's very informative and thank you so much for your inputs. But I have a question regarding the public sector. Like, for example, Aswarya, Prabhat and all, they are in the public sector. And some of Dr. Das and they are in the private sector. So how is the funding? What is the reality of the scenario? Like, is it really different getting funding in the private sector or public sector? Or is it like really you have the equal opportunity?
So I don't know about equal opportunity. I think definitely what seems to at least have mattered the most to me is, do you have access to the infrastructure and facilities needed to pull off what you're proposing? And I think it's really come down to that. And I think if I can't speak for the private sector people, but for us, that's really the most important thing that they're checking is, if you propose to do single cell genomics, if you're proposing to do all of these in-house virus production and all this, do you have the equivalent infrastructure and support and facilities? And they ask for a very clear justification of that, like, how do you say you're going to be able to do this? And I think having that helped in my case, and I'll let the private sector sort of take on their end.
Yeah, so may I? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think as Aswara suggested, it all depends on what you're proposing, what you're putting in your proposal. Because if you see in Ashoka, in our department, it's not a big department, we have 2 welcome intermediate fellows. We have 1 welcome senior fellow, and we have almost funding from all the government agencies, from DBT, ICMR, DST, sir, everywhere. So it's completely now depending on the things what you're writing in your proposal and whether you can accomplish those objectives with your collaborators or within your department. So it is not exactly public versus private, at least in my experience, what I have been seeing here in my 2 years. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
I think maybe how you can spend the money is a bigger difference, right? Rather than
Certainly, I would say, yeah, I'll add in here. So when you were saying about reimbursement and purchase, all these things are much smoother in private system. In a sense, we have a little bit of liberty to spend things in different ways. And also there are a lot of CSR opportunities that are coming up, corporate social responsibility. And that's another thing which also opens up for us. In a sense, we can get CSR grants also. So yeah, those things are a little bit, I would say, better as compared to the government system. But yeah, I mean, it's
earlier it used to be a problem, like, when I think 10, 15 years back, we wouldn't really support the projects from the private sector. But over the years, there's no difference between the institutions, the PIs applying from a private institute or from the public institution. It all depends on the quality of the proposal, what you have written, and is it achievable within a given period of usually 3 years. Otherwise, there's no difference. They're treated at par. That's what I just want to add on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks. Meenakshi has given the point, whatever you're looking for. If your institution is DSR registered, doesn't matter where, it could be an R&D lab in the Reliance Group, it could be a private educational institution, whatever, you are qualified to apply. Nobody is preventing you from applying. And then after that, it's really on the merits of the proposal. What is it that is going to be fundable? Do you have a question which your research strategy addresses? Is it achievable? Do you have the capability from your prior experience to say that, yes, every idea doesn't succeed. But do you have a real effort in that, and do you have the capability to do it? Nobody is going to hang you if out of the 10 objectives that you proposed, only 4 worked. That's still great. But it should be, what worked should be really very exciting. Now, with regard to whether I should apply in a private sector institution, R&D institution, or in an educational institution, which is public or private, well, it's a bet hedging strategy. So study where you're applying. Don't just, throw the, application around and do a cookie cutter approach. That doesn't help. Look where you're applying, understand what is that institution about, who are the people who are there, do I position myself as complementary, or do I position myself as an innovative thing? So each application, the more time you spend on it, the more successful you're likely to be, because there are many opportunities. Why do you want to miss it out? Certain institutions are very strategic. They say right out front what they are looking for in this cycle. So what's the point in applying there if your research experience, your future plans don't fall in there? So be a little bit of homework on where you're throwing your application goes a long way.
Thank you. We have questions from the fellows.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sushmita. I am doing a postdoc from Virginia Commonwealth University. So first of all, thank you. You gave a lot of insight about the research grants that we have to apply after we get in a position over there. But my question will take you back a little bit, to a time before you applied for the permanent position. So my question comes from, like, generally for these applications, we have to write research proposals. Okay. So we have to write research proposals. And so my question is, how specific that research proposal should be, like how specificity should be there in that? This is number one. And second thing is how similar or how different it should be from the kind of work that we have done in our PhD and postdoc. So if you can give us some insight on that. Thank you.
I can go first. I think there should be layers to it of things that are easily achievable, things that are ambitious, and things that are in between. I think you can show that you have different timelines for achieving things and strategies for if it doesn't work, then what else can you do? It's hard to convey all this in a 5-page research proposal, but I think having a figure that can kind of represent that would be a good way to do that. And similar or different from what you've done, I think, again, it has to show that you have the experience or the contacts or the training to be able to achieve the ambitious things as well, even if you don't know how achievable they are. But you can't be doing exactly a variant of your previous work. I've often been told, if you made protein A.1 in your postdoc, don't try to say that you're going to make protein A.1.1 or protein A2, and make that the whole of your faculty application. Like, there has to be innovation, and there has to be something that's clearly different from your postdoc work. It can't be exactly the same route. There has to be a new addition that you'll bring in, and that can be the ambitious part. It doesn't have to be the immediate part. I think there has to be something else. And they will often ask you, how is this different from your advisor's work? Or will the advisor be okay with you taking that work away from their lab if it does overlap a lot with the previous lab?
Okay, so I can go next. I think echoing what Anusha mentioned, the proposal and also your talk, which I think matters quite a bit when you give it to the institute, both of which should probably reflect some short-term goals that are achievable, but should definitely factor in a long-term vision for what you want to do in your lab in India. And I think the part that they pay a lot of attention to is actually the second half also, So you say you want to do all these little projects in the short term, what next? And I think that was a question that came up in pretty much every interview panel. So having that ready and structuring your talk and proposal accordingly will go a long way. And I think the question about how different should your work be it should be different. I mean, it can be in the broader domain for sure, right? I mean, of course, we all want to continue to study what the central question that we're studying, but you might specifically mention in your proposal how you plan to differentiate or distinguish and head it out right away, because that is going to also come up. So and I think this is a conversation you need to be having with your postdoc mentor about what well ahead of time, about what sort of things that you can work on, that you can take with you. So by the time I had sort of finished up my postdoc and started as a research assistant professor, I think that is when I clearly drew the line that, this is work that that is all going to be mine. So it was easy to justify to an interview panel why won't your postdoc mentor be working on this question. And I think the research proposal also looks into specifically, at least for the short-term goals, do you have the skill set needed to pull off what you're proposing to pull off? And importantly, how does that work fit in the broader scientific ecosystem of the institute you're trying to go into also? Like, is there someone doing exactly what you're doing, maybe in a different model system, or is this unique enough that you'll be bringing your own niche to the system? So those sorts of things also start to matter. And the proposal length should actually be quite short and concise. I had a really long NIH R01 style one that I had to really trim down because most places wanted a 5 to 7 max. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add that while I had not initiated this conversation, my postdoc advisor actually told me that I could take the mouse model with me. And it was right towards the beginning of my postdoc that she said, once we had established a behavior characteristics and all of that, she was quite clear when I was applying for grants in US as a postdoc. She was like, if you want to take this forward, it is all yours. I will not be working on this. So sometimes the PI may offer this. Otherwise, it's good to have that conversation right in the beginning. If you are carving out something from your postdoc research, it's important that you have ownership of it and your advisor is in the same page with you.
I'll just make a few points. One of the questions you need to ask the recruiters that what are they looking for? One of the most important part is, what is the value proposition you're bringing to the institute or wherever you're going? Because there are different types, right? The CSR labs, which you are expected to do research, come out with things yourselves, do a lot of fun stuff and all that. Whereas if you are applying to, let's say, MIT or to BITS and other places, there is a significant amount of teaching that you have to do. On top of that, you have to do some research. You apply to IITs, ICERs, it's a mix somewhere between those two. So you have to be very clear about the value proposition that you bring to wherever you're applying. And you can apply to various different places because your capabilities might be suited to a wide angle, a wide spectrum. Now, in terms of what you can take, what type of research you do, and how specific you want to go, that is going to depend on how much you want to reveal. So you have to be reasonably clear, yet somewhat hidden, in the sense that you don't want to tell every little step that you want to really do, because someone might get very specific ideas from them who's reading through, but people typically don't do that. But still, there is no harm in being a little bit careful in that regard. One of the things that is very, very critical is when you write out the proposal, you also have to typically write a teaching proposal and things like that. So you have to bring in, you have to make sure that you are covering the core of the subject that you are, of the department that you are applying in, but also bring in some new electives and all that. So that has to be covered in an academic institute typically. So these, I mean, you have to consider this whole spectrum. Whether how different it is going to be from the PhD postdoc experience and what new you take there. One looks at analysis, synthesis, innovation. Okay, you have to remember that these three words continuously. You analyze what you have done, you synthesize something new from there, innovate something out of it. So if you cover those 3 points in your research proposal enough, then you stand a much better chance in being read and questions asked. You have to have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. So these are few pointers. Whenever you apply, wherever you apply, depending on the space, one or more of these points will hold. Thank you.
Over to Pracheta.
Yeah, thank you, Paulami. I have one question actually to Dr. Prabhat. How does it feel like you were a volunteer previously and now you're on the other side? So could you just share this experience? You are a Sci-ROI volunteer, Dr. Prabhat?
Yeah. Hi. So, yeah, honestly speaking, this is very nice to be here in your motherland. So basically, from the beginning, when I was in my postdoc, basically my only goal was to come back to India. There was no second option for me because my wife was here in India, so I had only choice that was coming back to India with a job or without a job. So then based on that, basically I planned from the day one. Basically I had to plan everything. So, and basically this is all about failures, and then you will basically test a success. Only there will be 1 or 2 times you will get success, right? So within 3 years at least, I had one moderate publication that was in cell metabolism. Then I thought like, okay, this should be probably this will open up window. And I started applying, but I had very little reply from India. So basically, probably because I was not at all negative about that. Probably I thought probably my project proposal that is not good enough. So later in 2022, I got called from 2-3 institutes, and I went to one institute, and where Ishwarya, I met her there. So, and everything went well. But the reply that I got was because they are getting better applicants than me. So then I had to again, I had to restart. So basically in another year, I had one more publication. Then now I started basically in 2023, June, July onwards, I started applying after getting 2 at least, like I'll say, average or above average publications, one Nature Cancer and one Cell Metabolism. Then after 3 months, I actually got so many calls and also some offer letters. Finally, I joined here. So basically, if I'll say the opposing side here and being there, actually Sci-ROI provided me a lot of confidence. That's what I can say. It's not job, but definitely it provided me a lot of confidence because I did my PhD from Bose Institute, Calcutta. So basically my both PI, my doctoral mentor as well as postdoctoral mentor, they were basically assistant professors. So coming from an unknown PI, unknown place, it's very hard. So, but finally, yeah, it's not like you have to know. Basically, there is provision. So if you have enough publication, you have enough track records. So basically, I'm the example of that. So basically, you will get job. So that's what I can say. It's like there will be a time it will be for you. So you have to wait for that. So from 2022 to 2024, there was like 2 years. But before that, I had prepared well because I had only one choice. That was my goal post was in India. Basically, so if at all I have to score, that will be in India. So yeah, that was the only choice I had. So finally, I'm here. I'm really happy. And yeah, the overall yeah, situation in India is quite good, to be honest. Funding opportunities, and we have a lot of money, to be honest. But yeah, you have to put up your right idea, to be honest. So if you are putting right idea, you will be funded. So you don't need to worry about. If you have thought process going on and you have right projects on right track, then you will get it. That's what I can say. And also institutional funding wise, that is also good to negotiate, to be honest, because that will be your buffer. So you will come back to India, at least you need funding for few years before you get your external funding. So yeah, if you can, you negotiate. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Dr. Prawat. Just a last question to the panelists before we conclude. We had a very successful European event, annual meeting as such. So there we also had this young faculty session with those who have done their postdoc in Europe. So just to comparison from the panelist over here, is there any special advantages for doing your postdoc in US as such? Nothing, like it's just a comparative question as such.
Same
Like,
question, private versus government question. So there's no advantage as such. It's all about if I am working at EMPL, that's one of the best structural biology lab in the world, doesn't matter. So it depends which lab you are into, wherever on earth you are. If you're doing good work and obviously publishing it, that doesn't make a difference, in my opinion. I haven't been to Europe. Having said that, I should put a disclaimer. So probably someone who has done things in Europe may answer. According to me, that's not a difference, at least from the recruitment point of view.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was the point from the recruitment point of view.
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else would want to comment on it? Okay. Fine. Vaishali, I would request you to conclude this session.
Thank you, Pracheta. And I would again take this opportunity to thank all the young faculty members and the respective members from the Sci-ROI team and the respected faculty members who have joined this session and provided their valuable insights. I think it is a great discussion session which provides insights on the people who want to move back to India and how the transition would look like. Thank you so much for your time as well. And I would close this session with a warm regards from Sci-ROI team to everyone. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us over. Bye. All the best.
Yeah,
Thank you so
good luck.